Joining me now is New York-based singer-songwriter Chris Garneau, and his sixth album, In Reverse, is out now via The Orchard and Rough Trade Publishing. It's a lush cinematic collection exploring the end of a turbulent relationship and the quiet arrival of a new love. It's intimate, atmospheric, and deeply honest. Chris Garneau is with me to talk about the emotional reset behind it and what it means to let life move forward. Chris, welcome to On Air with Brian Peel. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for having me. Good to be here.
Boy, it's so nice to catch up. I know we've been chatting over the World Wide Web for a little while, and your team and yourself have been kind to share the work that you've been doing. You've had some exciting releases over the last little while. February was when In Reverse made its way into the world. Give us
hmm
a little bit of a background, what it's been like for you over the last few months.
Yeah, well, it's been a bit of a different release cycle for me. Always, leaf and a big, moment to let an album go out into the world and into the universe. This time around, though, so as you mentioned, it's my sixth full-length album. I'm used to being on tour around now these days after an album comes out. I kind of, since COVID, it's been like a very, very weird and complicated with touring. So I haven't done a ton of it since 2020, but it's usually like I feel like I'm in Europe, I'm in China, I'm in Brazil, I'm like in all these places around the world. But about a week after the album came out, I went with my boyfriend to Thailand for a few weeks and did some interviews and some press from there. But it's been a very freeing kind of thing to not be on tour. I am planning some shows in the fall, a little all over, but it's cool because I feel like I'm kind of getting the same experience that fans are getting or potentially new listeners, like where they're just kind of sitting with the album. It's interesting to like not be kind of cornered isn't the right word, but like be like pushed into like playing, a million shows in the first couple of months of the record coming out. And I think that what will be a little more fun for me is having it like have a second life in the fall and
Yeah.
bring it on the road. But it's been cool. I mean, I'm just really happy it's out there. I love this record. I'm super proud of it. And I feel like it's a very little tight collection of 8 songs and I hope people are just warming up to it and hanging out with it.
I will get you to deep dive into those songs in a second, but I want to just go back. You mentioned Thailand.
Yeah.
I'm sure you were replying to my messages lying on a banana lounge somewhere by the swimming pool, I bet. Yeah.
Totally, totally. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know we would have had an easier time of day to meet up had we done it at that moment, but I think playing as well. Right.
Yeah, it's crazy times. Well,
Yeah.
hopefully we do hit the shores of Thailand as well for you. Actually, this podcast has reached 93 countries as this goes to air right now. So
Incredible.
it's pretty exciting. So hopefully we've got a few listeners who are jumping on a catamaran to one of those fancy islands like I got to
Yeah.
do. But
Yeah, right?
anyway, for all of those who are listening for the first time and are like, Chris Garneau, who is this guy? Where did it all begin for you? What actually drew your interest into the music industry?
I was when I finished high school, I went to Berklee Music School in Boston, and I was still in like the final kind of stages of doing. I used to do acting and that kind of stuff, and I was kind of in that like in a crossroads where I was like, is it music or is it acting? And I was at Berkeley. I didn't really want to go to college. What I really wanted to do was make a record and go on tour and just like travel around the world. But I think the things that really made follow through and really choose it was first just a comfort level. I had studied piano classically and went into jazz a little later, and then like I think the first person that really made me understand that music was what I wanted to do was Nina Simone, because she was playing classical, she was playing piano, as a classically trained artist, but writing her own songs around that, which were everything from soul to, almost like, show standards, theater to rock, to pop. Like she was doing everything. She was covering Leonard Cohen. She was covering Francoise Hardy. They were all covering each other. And like all of those things, I felt very comfortable sitting behind a piano and singing. I did not
Man,
feel super comfortable on stage or in front of a camera. And that
what a
was when I
legend.
made the choice to just Like that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah, absolute superstar. What a legend, Nina Simone. I think we've got some of her
Incredible.
old vinyl. Incredible artist. So you'd say Nina would have been part of that driving factor, that motivation and the influence behind your music, right?
Definitely, definitely. Nina and also actually when I was a little younger, because my siblings were older and they were listening to Tori Amos, and Little Earthquakes came out when I was about probably 8 years old. And my sister would pass me her Discman, pass me her headphones with her Discman, driving around in a van. We lived in France at the time when I was a kid. And I remember like, again, I'm like studying piano classically, but then I'm like listening to this crazy bitch like like sing these like insane songs and like play piano like Bach. Like it was like insane. I didn't understand what I was listening to, but I
Yeah,
knew that that was what I wanted, or I wanted a piece of it. Yeah. That was that they were both wild experiences, but Tori arguably was crazier because I was like 4 years younger than I was when I discovered Nina Simone.
yeah. What an influence too. Absolute legend.
Complete.
And this
Yeah.
they're timeless classics, aren't they? Yeah.
They really are. And I mean, I think Tori, depending on the record, Little Earthquakes is quite easy, but then her other albums are a little less produced and a little more yeah, just a little more organic. But then there was another like span of probably not quite a decade, but maybe 8 years before I discovered Kate Bush, because now I'm like 12 or like 8 or something. So when I'm like 16, 17, 18, I'm getting into Kate Bush, and then I'm like, oh, now I get where Tori came from. You know what I mean? It's just like
Yeah.
that moment.
You called In Reverse, your latest release, a quiet victory. What does a quiet victory mean to you personally?
A quiet victory is something that you're not, it's not a brag, it's not a high and mighty, it's not virtuous or self-righteous. It's gentle, it's love, it's winning without it feeling like a war. It's something gently settling in without causing a ruckus. It's beautiful.
All those great
It's
things, isn't it?
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's not a presentation. It's not an image. It's not based around an image. It just is.
Because there is a line about love being already written into the body is beautiful. Where did that idea come from?
So in reverse, and that idea of love being written into the body means a lot of different things for me, to me, and for me. But the best way that I can articulate what that means and what it means to love in reverse is that the depth of that love comes before the history. And so there's this moment where you know that you love someone very early on, and then you're figuring out why, as opposed to trying to figure out if you love someone. And I think there's also something about the nervous system. Like I think a lot of past love, or at least for me, I'm only gonna speak for myself. A lot of past
Yeah.
love has been like kind of tied to instability or anxiety or uncertainty or highs and lows. And when that's gone, it can feel disorienting. So that also feels like the reversal.
Yeah.
Like this is actually how it should be. But for me, it feels like it's in reverse.
Yes. And
you
that's a
know?
perfect title. And there
Yeah.
it is, right there.
Hmm.
There's the title in all of its glory. The song feels calm, but emotionally deep. Was it hard
Hmm.
to resist making it more dramatic, Chris?
Right, right. Yeah. Well, I think, it's in this slow, I said 4/4 earlier. It's more of a 6/8 kind of, but whatever. It's the downbeat is it's a slow progression. And one thing that allowed it to kind of bloom for me was like the lyrics didn't fit the time. So I had to do a lot of work to vocalize everything in this like compressed time. Anyway, it kind of got this like Phil Collins, like his movement to the vocal pattern. And that started feeling like a big push for the song, even though it was still like at a slow BPM. And then, I think the other thing was like production wise, I mean, there is actually a lot there, but it just grows. It's really like an arc. But I do love that at one point, because you're going through about, it's a 6.5 minute song. You go through about 4 minutes or so, maybe even a little more, before it gets to this bridge where this like very like 80s kind of guitar solo comes in. And then that kind of intensifies the whole last 2 minutes of the song. And so that was the drama moment for me. It's that, and it felt so right. And when we were mixing it, we started just treating that a little bit to really like give it a lot of like grain and crunch, and but also like really make it like I really wanted it to sound like it was like, yeah, like a little like 80s rock band rehearsing in the garage, like a crunchy amp, you know,
Yeah.
but like loud. But that was all that I felt it needed as far as like drama went. Everything else is like the lyrics are really upfront. You can hear every word. There's not like really a lack of clarity. And, you know, the chorus is, you know, time can die, like time can fuck off. Time doesn't even
Yeah.
need to leave a note. It's like time could kill itself. Like that's like enough drama. I didn't feel like we needed to do more.
Yeah. When you wrote it, did you know that it was the emotional centerpiece of the record?
It was not It was not immediate, but pretty quickly it became clear. Yeah. There was like a moment. There was a very defined moment where I just knew that that's what the record was going to be called. It started to speak to other tracks that were already done or close to finished, and it made a lot of sense with Goldmine. It made a lot of sense with Last Party. It made a lot of sense um e- even with other songs that aren't even lyrically the same subject matter, but there
Mm.
were there was a thread.
Yeah.
And I also just love the term. I think not only just for myself and how genuine and, you know, deep and truly I felt that happening in my life, but there's something kind of poetic about something happening in reverse, even if other people don't know what I'm talking about. It just felt
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. Because the record explores the end of a turbulent relationship for you and the emergence of a new love. Did
Mhm.
those experiences overlap in real time at all?
They did, yeah. It was a really close, like, it was a very the proximity of the end of that turbulence and the beginning of this new, you know, very exciting time for me were only just a few short months apart. And the other thing that is interesting about that timing is that in the same moment that I was writing Goldmine, for example, I also let go of a bunch of other songs that were kind of part of this other chapter of my life, part of that turbulence, um, part of that kind of darker moment. And interestingly, like over a short summer, this was in 2024, I just burned them. Like they were just gone.
Mm.
There wasn't even like a big to do about it. I didn't really even need to kind of like think it over that long or reflect on it. I just kind of knew that there was this new path happening and that everything was changed and everything was going to be different moving forward. And the majority of the material that I had created for the album before, I felt fine just letting it kind of die or fade away.
Did writing these songs change how you approach relationships now, though?
Yeah, I would say that it has. I would say that if not writing them, producing them did. Like what I mean by that is so there's another song on the album that I released as a single called Off the Ring. And that had gone through many different incarnations before the recording that exists on the album today. And what I was finding when I was making that song, writing it, recording demo after demo after demo, I think I made between 8 and 10 demos of that song. And then we fully produced a version of it, still not the one that's on the record today. So, you know, everybody tracked on it, drums, guitars, bass, you know, all this production, a million vocals, but it didn't do what I wanted it to do, didn't sound how I wanted to sound. And what I realized was that it was because it wasn't actually reflecting how I was like living in the moment. And I what was happening with me is that I was having fun. I wanted to I wanted my body to move. I didn't want to be like locked into this kind of exhausting, kind of mopey, uh, like energy. And so when
Mm.
we reproduced Off the Ring with Patrick Higgins, we really we went away from analog and just went really into digital world and like sequenced all these beats. And it started to feel really fun. And I was like, it was this moment where I was like, everything's kind of like one thing speaking to the other, that thing speaking back to itself. It was like a call and response. Like, I want to live like this. Now I want my songs to sound like this. Or I want the songs to sound like this, and I want to reflect that in how I live, if that makes
Because you
sense.
mentioned it does, and you mentioned Patrick Higgins. You did work
Mm-hmm.
alongside Patrick, Dan Marcellus, and Mike Maguire. What
Mm-hmm.
did each of them uniquely bring to the table for you?
Well, it was so cool because I've never worked with three producers on one record. And it
Yeah,
felt really appropriate and correct. In one way, it was only happening just kind of by circumstance, but once I saw it playing out, it started to make a lot of sense, and I realized that I think it was a little more intentional than I had thought previously. They all bring such different energies. Patrick Higgins is like, more known for quite experimental work. He has his own solo project under his name, which is he's, like a classically trained guitarist, and an incredible engineer and producer. He has worked in the band Z's. He has produced with and is starting a new project with Nico Jar. His world is very like, I mean, he is an acoustic, instrumentalist, but he's also a gearhead. He's like a big, big gearhead. And we've made a lot of work together. And so we're just really happy, me and Patrick, to jump in the studio and make a new kind of vibe happen every time we do it. But I would say he's the experimental one. Mike McGuire is more generally speaking, bringing sensibilities that are very kind of folk pop oriented, that are very like early aughts. I know Mike from he used to work with Gregory and the Hawk. I don't know if you know this project from back in like 2005. He's really, he's like Wurlitzer, Rhodes, guitars, drums, bass, everything's like lush, everything's like organic. It's just, he really knows that world. And then Dan Marcellus, who produced another couple songs and it also mixed the whole record, is kind of somewhere in the middle. He's like a virtuosic drummer. So he plays drums on a bunch of stuff, but then he's really good at like taking fragments of things and like building that and putting it together. And he's also just a really good listener. So like he's like here for me. He's like he wants to make my dream happen. Three really different worlds, and Dan was kind of the thread of everyone.
because it would have been a little bit of a balance. How did you balance the lush cinematic arrangements, but keep the emotion intimate and human?
Yeah. I think the first thing was having like a really solid foundation, like a solid bass and drum foundation. And that is a really good start to like having that little like pop sound and structure like really intact. Kirk Schoenherr is a guitarist who played guitars across the record. He's this incredible writer and producer, and he tours with everybody. He kind of created this like guitar thread that exists across the record that is really like anywhere from he can kind of do whatever. But he's playing that like big guitar solo on Goldmine. In reverse, he's doing like a bunch of extra guitars on Riot, and he that was he's just like a very special person to have working on the project. And then I think the other thing is just the songwriting for me has changed a bit. Really worked hard I wanted these choruses and some of these verses to be like hooking people. Like I was trying to write hooks, and not in a like today I'm going to sit down and write something catchy. Like that's not really how my brain works, and I don't even know that I can totally do that. But it was important to me that I had like some very kind of like pop structure. Like I have a lot of songs from other albums or EPs that are a bit more meandering. There's not necessarily a chorus. There might be something that kind of resembles a chorus, but this whole album, except for the last track, it's very like pop structure. And so I think if you have all of those pieces together on the technical side, but then you're also writing really deep, genuine lyrics, then you get that partnership.
I've been pretty blessed to visit New York more than 6 or 7 times, and it's an amazing, amazing city. You're very lucky to be based and live over there. Did producing in New York influence the sound in any way?
I would say that, you know, uh, it, it's really hard to say when you're like in it. I've been in New York since I was a teenager, and I'm, in my early 40s. I think that the world here is that you get this metropolis, right? Of like so many different people working in music that there is a lot of access to dynamic, you can take like a lot of different routes to like produce and work and play with people, and there isn't one kind of New York sound. You know, I also had just moved back to the city halfway through making this album. I was living upstate New York in the country for many years. And that's coincidentally like, that's like how I know Patrick Higgins, like one of the producers. And, the other two guys, like Dan, I know from Los Angeles, and Mike, I know from years and years ago, but from New York City. But, I think that we all sort of I think that we all sort of inherently do have something in our musical character that is New York-ish, you know? Something that I think started popping out while we were making this record was it was getting very like shoegazy, like there was a lot of like late 80s, early 90s sounds that started getting infused into these recordings, especially when we started mixing. And I loved it, and I wanted that to be consistent and threaded through the album. And I think whether that's New York or not, or London, I don't know, but there's something like it's like Atlantic Ocean. I don't know. There's
Yeah,
like
I
there's
think
like
so.
that energy of like north wind.
Isn't it? I don't know.
Yeah.
Just something about New York
Gritty.
City. Just
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
just absolutely stunning. Which leads me to the next point, because I'm going to come out and say it. You're a fine specimen. I've seen the bios, I've seen your press photos, I've seen all of that on social media. Absolutely stunning. What did you want the visualizer and the video to capture that the
hmm
song alone couldn't do?
hmm I just wanted it to be like normal. I wanted it to be me. I felt like, there's a lot of albums conceptually where you create a world. I don't, always necessarily feel like I'm doing that, or at least like that I'm not doing it intentionally. But this album did really feel like, okay, like we made these songs, we made them quite fast. We pretty much built this album in a year. And it felt like this world was just kind of like there, like it just existed on the page. And then when I wanted to make everything that was visually attached to it, all I wanted it to do was feel fluid. I didn't feel like I needed to create another visual world because I felt like I was already there. I was already living it. I had just moved back to Brooklyn when we started doing the prep for this kind of epic photo shoot, which was only one day, but we covered a ton. We really got a lot in. But everything was like it was in my house, it was on my roof, it was on the photographer's roof,
I love
it
the
was in my
roof. I
neighborhood.
love the rooftop. Beautiful.
Yeah. And the other thing about that is that it had been a little over like 20 years since I first moved to New York, and yet it felt like how it felt the first day I moved here. My life, like, so it was this weird like recall of memory, and yeah, there wasn't more that needed to be done. Like, there's a lot of pictures where I'm not wearing clothes, or shirt. It was August, but also like that's because that's like kind of how I exist. Also, like I hate wearing clothes, and
And
like
that's okay.
if
You're
it's like
allowed to
over
be.
70, so it all felt very easy. My one of my best friends was a stylist. One of my other best friends did the photos, and he's an exceptional photographer. And so yeah, I don't know. I think once you start trying too hard, and I'm speaking from my own learned experience, like when you try too hard, that's when stuff can start looking weird. It's like, that's like not, that's not feeling organic. That's not feeling, there's something a little off. And I've made photos like that, not to like disparage myself, but I didn't want to get into that territory of something being like, he wouldn't do that, or I wouldn't say that, or I wouldn't wear that. Like I wanted it to be very me, you know?
Yeah. Well, look, you've got my vote of confidence. If you want to walk around in a pair of white underwear on a rooftop on a balmy New York evening, absolutely knock yourself out. It's an absolute yes from
Thank
me, and
you.
hopefully a lot of the people watching this will be able to check that out as well. Some of the track names on the record, Riot, Goldmine, Cannon, Last Party, all signify, strength or discovery, structure,
Mm,
repetition. If a new listener only hears one track first, what would you want it to be, do you think?
mm.
This is a key because
Yeah,
as a manager and a radio host, I'm all about the powerful tracks and the strong songs and the lead singles and the
yeah,
focus track,
yeah.
and can make or break whether they become a fan or not.
Totally,
What
totally.
what track would you want them to listen to?
Well, for this album, it's Goldmine. I mean, this album started. Goldmine is the thing that made me understand what this album was going to be. It's a new direction for me. I love the song. I think it's so fun. It feels like the teen in you, but also this like other like world that's like hard to name, but it feels very accessible and I loved it. I loved making it. And that is my favorite track.
It is absolutely stunning, stunningly beautiful. We'll have to
Thank you, Brian.
put a clip out there along this interview. Since your debut, Music for Tourists in 2006,
Hmm.
how has your relationship with your voice changed, do you think, Chris?
That's a great question.
It's 20 years ago, so you've obviously,
Yeah.
I'm not saying you were terrible back then, but I'm saying you would have learned so much over time to
Yeah.
develop and change the way you vocally present on a record or on stage or on tour.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I think there's a couple different things about that I could say about that, but, one thing that's really clear to me about when I was 19 years old and I was making my first record is that I was very traumatized by my childhood. I was quite afraid of uh, men, and I was quite afraid of being masculine myself. And so there was a sort of piece of me, and I was also coming, from like part of my early history was like the theater world as well. But I think that I really wanted to express fragility and, sensitivity. And the only way that knew how to do that at the time was through a sort of androgynous sound. I don't think that it was forced or fake because it was how I performed and how I sang and how I recorded back then. Was there an affect? Sure. But it's still, at the time, I believed myself. I felt genuine and I felt attached to that instrument. And over the years, I think that a lot of things have changed for me, and I started to have this realization at some point that sort of I had a lot of comfort in a lower register that I hadn't previously explored or known of. And that kind of started happening around when I made my uh my fourth album, Yours, in 2016, that I was like discovering this like, yeah, this like lower register that felt more baritone, that felt and again, there was comfort. There was comfort that I was really feeling there too. And so that's the biggest change that I've, seen in my relationship to my voice over the
Mm,
last 20 plus years. Other than that, I think that, the voice and any instrument that somebody has access to is that it's allowed to change and shift. And I think that's really natural and normal too. And so like I appreciate and respect what I did when I was younger, but it is a different sound now. But, I respect where it is now. And I hope that I
yeah.
still have a voice in another 20 years.
Oh, I'm sure you will. I'm sure you will. I mean, I'm not going to ask you to pick between Paris and New York, Chris, but you've got roots in both. Do you
Hmm.
feel creatively split between worlds, or
Mm.
do you spend your time in do you split your time in Paris and New York when you're working?
I did. I used to spend a lot more time in Paris because my label was based there and my booking agent was there. And also just I used to tour a lot more than I do now. I think the things about Paris and about France in general is that I love the crowds. I love the audiences there. There's attention to detail. there's a patience that the audience has there that we lack in the US. And so I feel more respected and more appreciated there. I've definitely done a lot more radio and press with journalists who I love and admire than I have here in the US. But on the other hand, like I've been in New York most of my life. It is my home, and that's that's hard to look away from. Mm. I think that the truth is I would probably prefer to retire. I'd prefer to be an older person in Paris, and just kind of fade away there. But in the meantime, I love living in New York.
Yeah, geez, you're blessed. You're lucky to have access to both amazing cities. The shape of the music industry, Chris, has changed quite significantly over the years, including the use of social media, and that is the joy about how we've connected on that professional level. How do you feel about the industry as a whole, and what does it mean to you getting your records out into the public eye, whether it's through social media or live performance?
Well, it means everything to me to have the records out in the world and have people listening to them around the globe. That's not something that I could have predicted 20 years ago. And if I had, I wouldn't have predicted it would keep going, for so long. I'm super blessed. I've had a lot of luck in my life. And I mean that really. I mean, like, some of it is luck. It really is because you never know. But, on the other hand, speaking of the industry itself, it's tough. It's bad. It's not in good shape. I think a lot of us, um, and people who are much much higher profile than me, are still struggling in a lot of ways when we shouldn't be. We are working, we are producing work, and these platforms wouldn't exist without us. So whether you have 100 monthly listeners or 10 million, like, the platforms just simply wouldn't exist if we weren't there. There is no, you know artists are not being treated fairly. And I think that is, it is sad when you have to have a commercial license, on TV or film in order to get through the year without working a second job. And I see this time and time again. I don't know what happens for me from year to year. It's always a gamble. And I wish that we weren't, like, gambling our lives away. But on the other hand, music has never promised anything to anybody. So I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. Well, look, if it means anything, you've got a fan in Melbourne, in Australia, so you've got my full support, Chris. If
Thank you.
um if In Reverse captures relief and arrival,
Mm.
where do you feel you're heading next?
Acceptance of that relief and that arrival, because that's the other part. That's the other thing about happiness, is you have to also accept it. So that's the next part of the work.
Super exciting. You've got tours, you've performed, you've played some dates, and you've got some exciting things lined up. What's on the cards for you next?
Yeah. So you mentioned Music for Tourists earlier. It was my first record. This is the 20th year anniversary of its release. So I'm gonna release a few new piano vocal recordings from that album in the fall, just as a little, you know, kind of, yeah, celebration of the 20 years. And I'm playing a few shows around Canada and the US and probably in Europe. And yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. Yeah.
Well, we want the fans to tune in. Give us a plug. Where can we connect with you? Your website, chrisgarnow.com. I have landed on your website. I've landed on your homepage, and you're
Hmm.
stripped back in an amazing fur
The
coat.
fur. That was,
Absolutely stunning.
yeah, thank you so much. That's really, like, yeah, that is the thing, it feels like, yeah, I was mentioning that photo shoot. Some of it might feel a little fluffy, but that's a moment. That's a real look at on the living room couch every once in a while. You never know. But yeah, chrisgarneau.com, Instagram, is where I'm probably the most active, and Facebook as well. And Bandcamp is, everything that I've produced and released is available on Bandcamp with lyrics and all of that extra stuff. So that's a good place to go to.
You've also got you've obviously the digital release, which is what the quick young guns want in the music, but you've also got a beautiful vinyl pressing of the
That's
record as
right.
well.
That's right. Coming out in June. Yes, it'll be. It's just a limited edition, but there are units remaining. So yeah, yeah.
Super exciting, Chris. I really appreciate the time you've had to join me today.
Thank you,
And
Brian.
folks, support our industry. I know I speak a lot about the local music scene and our local music industry locally here in Australia, but also abroad and internationally. Chris, based in New York. Check him out online, chrisgarneau.com, and also on social media. He's a lovely fellow on Instagram. Go and say g'day. It is at Chris Garneau on social media. Thank you so much, Chris. And
Thank
Apple
you so
Music,
much.
Spotify, all of the digital platforms where we can grab your latest record from, right?
That's right. Yeah. Yep.
Thanks so much for joining us, Chris.
Thanks, Brian. I'll see you soon. Be well.